It was called The Man in Black. And there was the great singer, Rebecca and I will still sing a little bit. I fell into a burning ring of fire.
Cash,
Johnny
yes.
Cash.
Yeah.
And then the rabbi in black.
The rabbi
Jonathan
in black.
Cahn.
I guess that's better than the Cahn yell you did the last
Hey,
time.
didn't you like that? That was so cool.
I did.
In Star Trek.
I did.
William Shatner
I'll take it.
screamed out
You know,
Cahn.
black is like love. It covers a multitude of sins.
Okay. Listen, Joni tells me all the time, every woman needs to have about 5 pairs of black pants.
Slacks,
Slacks.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Okay, listen, everybody knows about the best-selling book, The Harbinger, and there's the video, a DVD, The Harbinger Decoded. He has all of these resources and more. But my question to you is, go ahead and take your little sip while I read the question. That is, what has been happening in terms of Bible prophecy since you were here last?
Yeah, a lot has been happening, and a lot has happened in America, and it's very profound. We need to be aware of it. And one thing is that, you know, I always say, you'll always hear me say this, and I'll always give a caution. And I know we're going to talk about the prophetic jubilee this time, but always the caution: God is God is sovereign. He can do as He pleases. We cannot put Him in a box, and we can't put a date on things. However, now having said that, since last time, what happened in the Shemitah is actually very significant, because now we're in the prophetic period here of the prophetic Shemitah. But what happened actually is this. First of all, one of the signs of the Shemitah is that there's a shift. There's often a shift in history of power. 140 years ago, the American age began, when America became the strongest economic power on earth, supplanted the British Empire. This has been 140 years. That 140-year period came to an end with the Shemitah. This Shemitah ended. America is no longer the strongest economic power on earth. I've warned of that for a long time. The crown has passed to China. That's one thing. Gigantic.
Right, you must give a quick definition of Shemitah.
Yes.
Because some people don't know what that is.
The Shemitah is the 7-year period, the 7-year mystery, when it kind of means the fall, when you at that time you've had some of the most major crashes or changes of history at that time. The Sabbath year. The other thing is that when people focus on days, they often miss something, and that is that the overall pattern of the Shemitah is that the stock market begins to descend in a month-long descent. Well, that is exactly what happened this time. It manifested. Spring, it reached its peak, it began to descend up until the time of the end of the Shemitah. When it reached the last month, which is Elul, the Elul 29, when it reached that time, you had the world markets actually collapsed. It produced 2 of the greatest day crashes in world history, produced Black Monday, which is the greatest intraday crash in world history. It actually wiped out 4,000 points from the Indian markets, 12,000 from Brazilian markets, $2 trillion, not billion, of the American markets, $11 trillion were wiped out of the world markets. And the engine of the world economy is now China. China lost 42% of their realm. I mean, it wiped out 42%, and up to the end of the Shemitah. So what I'm saying here is now the principles of judgment. More than that happened. We'll get into some very, very profound things. But America is still progressing towards judgment away from God. I mean, America is racing.
Let me interject this.
Yes.
China now holds 21% of America's debt. 21%.
Amazing. And in the Bible, debt is a symbol. You know, what Israel says, if you follow me, you'll lend to many nations, you will not borrow. But if you turn from me, well, what's happened to America? We were the greatest creditor nation on earth. But as we turned away from God, we've become the greatest debtor nation. This is a house of cards. House of cards. So there have been several things. And in the moral or spiritual realm, this year was gigantic, because 1973 was the year of the Shemitah. That's the year that America legalized the killing of unborn children. This year, something else happened. Gigantic. And this is very important to know. In the Bible, there's a principle called the act of desecration. And that is, before judgment, there's an act where something is desecrated. Desecration is when you take something holy and you desecrate it. And what happened is, you remember Daniel in Babylon. He's in the palace of Babylon. And the king, though, he calls for a celebration of celebrating to the gods. He says, bring out the vessels of Jerusalem, the vessels of the temple, and we're going to celebrate with God's vessels. Well, they do. They celebrate to the gods of Babylon. They drink out of God's vessels. This is an act of desecration. At that moment, the handwriting appears on the wall. Now the judgment is going to come. The act of desecration is preceding judgment. Okay, so now desecration, when you take something holy and you turn it for an unholy purpose. Well, marriage is also a holy vessel of God, as much as the vessels of the temple, as much. And what happened is, so here, what happened in America during this Shemitah, and Shemitah also means the fall, what happened is you had the striking down of marriage as we know it, the striking down of the biblical definition of marriage. This is gigantic. We crossed the line. This is an act of desecration. But not only that, another thing is that when that happened, another holy vessel is the rainbow. The rainbow belongs to God, not man. It's God's holy symbol of his covenant. What happened? When marriage was struck down, it was celebrated all over America with a sign of the rainbow, the desecration of the other. It was a double desecration. And then that night, the president orders the White House to be lit up, first time in the history that I can ever remember, not red, white, and blue, but in the colors of the rainbow, to celebrate the destruction of marriage. Yeah, that you see right there, that is a triple desecration. That's the White House now becoming a vessel of that. So these are 3 desecrations in one day.
I told our producer of this program, I said, George Washington probably turned over in his grave if he was aware of that. I mean, it's just shocking that our government, our Supreme Court, and our president and our judges would stoop so low. It's just, I cannot even believe that this is America.
You know, you prefaced all of this by saying that as Christians, as believers, we have that blessed hope. So we don't share all of this to bring fear.
That's right.
But we share it to help you to understand that we need to pray.
That's right.
And I do believe that revival is coming to this generation. God is going to do. We'll talk more about that. But I have to tell you, on the day that the Supreme Court made that judgment, I mean, in my spirit, I was so grieved. And it was so interesting to me how there were so many Christians that were lackadaisical, or like, oh, that's no big deal. We don't have to worry about that. Let's just... But I knew that there was something deeper in the spirit realm that had taken place as a result of that.
Well, I want to interject this too. Let's just call it what it is. It's interesting that in the 2008 presidential campaign, both then Senator Barack Obama and then Senator Hillary Clinton, remember she was Senator of New York, both said that they were against same-sex marriage and that the definition of marriage was between one man and one woman.
Yes.
What happened?
Yeah.
What happened? Once they got elected? Oh, I didn't really mean that.
It's called political correctness. I mean, that is what it is.
Political expediency.
The same reason why Hillary Clinton won't call Islamic radicals.
Neither will President Obama.
What they are.
Yeah. Radical Islam. They won't say it. It's like, oh, I don't know what that word is. That's not in my vocabulary.
Yeah, this is the same pattern that ancient Israel went through. This is a nation that Israel knew God. It was founded by God, but then turned away, and as it kept going, started calling what was sin as if it was holy, and what is holy as evil. And that's exactly where we are. And the same thing happened. And it's not an accident that now we're witnessing believers actually being thrown in jail, for simply saying, I can't go along with this. I mean, we have crossed lines. This is the template of the harbinger continuing, and this is defiance before God. I'll tell you something else with this. There's a date on the biblical calendar which marked the day when the hedge of Jerusalem's protection was broken. The hedge was broken when Babylon did that first wall. It's called the 9th of Tammuz. It's a fasting day. So this is what it removed the hedge, and then judgment came. That day is the 9th of Tammuz. The day that marriage was struck down was the 9th of Tammuz, the mourning day on the biblical calendar when the hedge is removed that protects a nation.
All right, now I want to ask this question because I don't want to sit over here and be depressed myself. And I'm sure our viewers don't. Is it woe is me, doom and gloom and despair? We're all going to hell in a handbasket. America's going to be destroyed. Is there hope? Is there some good news in the midst of all of this despair?
Yeah. And we have to be aware, number one, we as watchmen, we have to be aware of the signs. Yeah, as long as there is God, there is hope. As long as there's God, always. And in fact, when I've shared this before, that I don't believe there would be any harbingers if there wasn't hope. Because what's the point of warning if there's no hope of turning?
Good point.
The thing, in fact, I believe that if there wasn't a shaking, or there wasn't shaking coming, there wouldn't be hope. Most of us came to the Lord because we were shaken. I came to the Lord because I was hit by a locomotive train. I wouldn't be saved if it wasn't for that train. Most of it, and the same with nations too. America has grown so deafened. I'm not talking about the believers, but some of them, yes. But the culture has grown so defiant. We gotta call it what it is. But that it will take God shouting now. And so the thing is that I believe that the warnings and these things that happen are actually the hope we have, because I believe there can be revival, but it's not going to come easy. I believe there will be revival. There can be revival, but it will come through shaking, and it will come through the voice of God calling. And I believe absolutely.
And what about our viewers today? What can they do? What should they be doing?
Well, one of the things is first of all, we have to realize this. These are the last days. People think that it's just days of darkness. It's not. There's dark and light. In the end times, the dark gets darker, but the lights have to get brighter. And so what happens in the end times is the grays disappear. The middle ground disappears. There's not that nominal Christianity will disappear. It's going to become radical one way or the other. If the dark is getting darker, it's time for the lights of God to get brighter. This is not the time to be silent, not the time to compromise, not the time to fear, not the time to be weak. This is the time to be all the more sold out to God, because we always talked about we want to live in biblical times. These are biblical times. These are the same times that Paul lived in, same times that Elijah lived in. And yet it produces the greatest Christians, the greatest believers. If we will be, the dark is getting radical. We have to get radical for God. And so the promise is, God says, the eyes of the Lord search the entire earth, looking for the one whose heart is completely his, that he will lift up that one. He'll show himself mighty. Well, we have to be that one. You be that one. God will protect. Remember something else. If you won't know one Hebrew word, the word for salvation or safety is Yeshua. That's Jesus. If you're in Yeshua, you don't fear. If you're in Yeshua, but if you're not in, get in him, and you don't have to fear.
Okay, it is a fact that light does appear to be the brightest when it's the darkest.
Absolutely.
What a great opportunity. Pastor Rod Parsley called me last night, and we were talking about some of this, and I brought this up to him. I said it's always been in the most difficult situations that has caused men to turn to God. So this can be the church's finest hour and your finest hour as well. So I want you to be encouraged today. And the other thing that I advocate is this, because people talk about, well, is there going to be a rapture? And if there is it before the tribulation? Is it in the middle of the tribulation? Is it at the end of the tribulation? But see, I agree with what Rabbi Jonathan Cahn said. As long as you are a believer and you are in Christ, you don't have to worry about it. Because regardless of when it is, you're with the Lord, and he's going to take care of you, and he's going to protect you. Now, I want to give you an opportunity. If you have a question for Rabbi Jonathan Cahn, go to the phone and call, or go to daystar.com and click on questions, and we may even take a call live over there. Joni, have you got some questions?
I do have some questions that have come in. Here is someone saying, will the third temple be built before the last 7 years prior to Jesus returning?
I believe it has to be. First of all, the temple in the time of Jesus took 40-something years. I believe it could happen much quicker, but it's there in place. It's all in Daniel. It speaks of that 7-year period. In the middle of that period, the temple will be desecrated. So it has to be there. Really, it has to be there at the beginning. So yes, I believe that's one of the key things. That Temple Mount. And by the way, I know we'll get into it later. We're in the prophetic jubilee, which can be linked to that. But the temple has to be restored. Before the end.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So in other words, you can't desecrate a temple that's not there.
Absolutely, and it's not going to happen in a
Right.
second. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
let's. Here's another good question that says, "What does Rabbi Cahn think about the presidential election in 2016? How important is that?"
Very. I mean, every election is important, but what we have had in the last period is we've had a major acceleration of America's turn from God, and without godly leaders, I mean, it's not just the leader, it's us. But without that, if we have another period of leaders who are seeking to move America, accelerate America from God, away from God, we are going to be in such deep trouble. So yes, it means something. The president isn't the only thing, it's us. But the president, you know, God gives godly leaders. He also allows for ungodly leaders or leaders who will go against it. But the leader can be a judgment as well. So we need to pray. I mean, it's a polarization. It's not the same on both sides. And this is not here to be political, but there is gigantic differences between one party and another party. And there are born again believers on one party right now, very much. And there are those who have positions that are clearly against the Word of God. So yes, it matters. And yet we need to pray. You know, we don't put our hope in politics, but we are the light. We have to be a light upon the world, and we should affect this world in any way we can. And that's one of them, is that realm. So yes, we need to be praying. People say there's no difference. There is a very big difference.
Okay, well, I know, Jonathan, that there are people that have watched you on Table Talk with me.
Yes.
They've watched you here on Marcus and Joni and other networks as well. And you talk so much about the Shemitah and how important it was for 2015, the blood moons, all of those things. So for people who are watching, I know we talked about some of it earlier, but could you just kind of go through a laundry list of the significant things that happened?
Sure.
Because were they different than what you thought they were going to be? Or
I've always, every time we talk, Johnny, I always say, again, you cannot say God has to do something in one way, but the cycle can be stronger or less or different. But what happened is what happened this past Shemitah is that actually the most prevalent pattern of the Shemitah took place, and that is that we saw the stock market crashing for about several months, including some of the worst days in the history of the stock market. At the same time of the peak of the Shemitah, up to the end of the Shemitah, that was Elul, that was August, that was Elul of the Shemitah. We also saw, not only that, we saw also the end of the American age as the strongest economic power on earth. That happened. That was replaced this year by China. This is 140 years of history came to an end. Shemitah means fall. It's seen the rise and fall of nations. Also, you have a spiritual fall. We said 1973 was the year of a gigantic fall, and that was a Shemitah year when we legalized the killing of children or the unborn children. Well, this one has seen another one, and that is the destruction of marriage, another gigantic fall. So yes, things have accelerated. It was a very, very significant year.
Okay, here is Jack that's watching us in Michigan. Is Turkey or Russia a country that you believe will eventually be attacking Israel? Or who do you think is going to eventually be attacking?
Yeah, well, that's in Ezekiel 38 and 39, and Ezekiel 38 and 39 speaks specifically about a confederacy of nations. One of them has links clearly to the Russian people. So you've got, for years, biblical prophecy has pointed in that direction. But also, and Turkey as well. It also mentions Libya. It also mentions Iran. Now, Iran was actually an ally of Israel not way far back, and that has turned as well. So all those most of those nations are against Israel. But yes, Turkey is Turkey's significant. So is certainly Russia. Certainly.
Okay, a lot of fear about ISIS.
Yes. There's something major here. Okay. And this, the harbingers have not stopped. They've continued. One of the harbingers in the book is the second harbinger is the terrorist, or the harbinger of the terrorist. And that is that when this first warning came to Israel, it came through the ancient Assyrians. The Assyrians are the fathers of terrorism. Every terrorist today is linked spiritually to the Assyrians. The Assyrians invented terrorism, and they're the ones in that Harbinger scripture. They're the ones who that strike came through them. And God allowed. Now, God's against the terrorists, clearly, but he allowed it to happen. So one of the signs of danger of judgment is actually in the Bible is terror. And what happened is when 9/11 happened, you had a strike of terror just as you had back then, and you had people who were linked to the Middle East, all that. But the pattern of the Harbinger is that first strike wasn't the last strike. When it happened to Israel, when the Assyrians came in, it wasn't the last. They actually would come back even stronger. So I've always wondered, since then, if the template of the Harbinger, will it be that there'll be another resurgence of terrorism and concerning America and the West? Well, what has happened is ISIS happened. Now, ISIS is even more linked to the ancient Assyrians than Al-Qaeda. ISIS is like, it's the reappearance of the second Harbinger, on steroids, in a sense, because ISIS, the land of ISIS is Iraq and Assyria. That's their claim. Iraq and Assyria is the core of the Assyrian Empire, the same empire of the Harbinger. They took over Mosul, the city of Mosul. That's Nineveh. That's the same city that plotted the judgment on Israel back then. Not only that, the ancient Assyrians were known for their brutality. They were known for mutilating their victims. Actually, they were known for beheading their victims. Well, ISIS is like the incarnation of that. Not only that, the ancient Assyrians, not only they beheaded for terror, but they broadcast it to everybody. They put it on their stone walls. They showed everybody what they did with their beheadings. ISIS is doing the exact same thing, but through social media. It's the 21st century. So ISIS is like it's amazing how much they are. This is the reappearance of the second Harbinger. So it's an ominous thing. And the principle in the Bible is that when Israel turned away from God, and they wanted the gods of the Assyrians, they wanted the gods of Babylon, God said, okay, you want that? You're going to get the full thing. And so the terror was actually a judgment. So the West is now saying, we don't want Christianity, we want anything that's anti-Christian. Well, God says, you want anti-Christian? You've got it right now. These terrorists are you don't want Christianity, you don't want mercy, you don't want love. You've got it. So interesting thing with what this recent summer and now, the United Nations had several initiatives against Israel. They were all sponsored by France. And France was saying, Israel saying, don't do this, don't do the Palestine, don't do this. This puts us in danger from Islamic radicals. Well, what happened is Islamic terrorism came to France, So I believe it's an ominous thing, and now we're watching it in America.
Yeah.
We have to, this is what the template of the Harbinger actually points to. So we have to be very much vigilant watching this.
It was a real wake-up call
Yeah.
for France and for the British and for all of that area.
Yeah.
I think more so than anything that could have happened here in America, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. This is the very same pattern, and the fact that now we just had one in America. This is a whole new day, and ISIS is more dangerous than Al Qaeda, but this is the pattern. Remember something. The word harbinger means warning of something to come. And what happened to ancient Israel when the Assyrians first attacked, that was a harbinger of something to come in the future. So this is something that we need to come back to God.
Right.
Desperately.
Well, and it is amazing to me how you see so many streams of revival around the world where God is supernaturally appearing to people.
Yes.
And how his grace and mercy is calling for people to come home.
Yes.
As evil abounds, grace
That's
so
right.
much more abounds.
That's right.
But at the same time, we can talk about God's grace and mercy and how much he loves all of us, and he sent his son for us.
That's right.
But we still have to look at the warning signs of people who are willfully sinning against God and the foundational truths that this country was built upon.
That's right.
Let's talk a little bit about, someone's asking about Syria and Russia's involvement with supporting President Assad.
Yes.
And here we have now other countries that are coming into Syria along with America. Then you have the rebels, and then you have so many different groups So what do you feel like is going to happen there?
Well, it's chaos. It's like suddenly things have been destabilized, which is another link with the Shemitah. It's a destabilization.
And that a lot started with Saddam Hussein. The destabilization.
Yeah, and then the Arab Spring. We were saying this is so good, so good. Not really, not really. This is so good. You've unleashed something. And America was part of this too. Go back to that. When 9/11 happened, you said, okay, we're gonna solve this way. This is the pattern. We're gonna do it, but not God. Well, what happened is we actually helped to unleash these things inadvertently. Without God, you can't solve the problem. So things have become worse, actually. And the thing is that so there's destabilization. And another thing that happened is in the Middle East is on the Temple Mount. Violence broke out recently, and that started this whole thing in Israel and started all these things. Well, the day that, I don't even remember this, Joni, but the day that the violence broke out on the Temple Mount, which started this new wave of chaos in the Middle East, happened on Elul 29, the day of the Shemitah, meaning the shaking. So all this has happened there. So yeah, and I think that this is one of the things that you cannot solve spiritual problems with physical means. It's God. We need to get right with God. Then we will not have to worry about the terrorists, But if we keep on defying God and we will have to worry about it because He's our protection.
No, we were just in Israel and we wanted you to go with us.
No, I wanted to.
You didn't get to go with us, but maybe next time. But back to Syria, Russia, China, all of these big players, and then we were right there looking over where that great battle will take place that Revelation talks about, Armageddon. So what do you see as far as God's time clock? I know we can't, give dates and all of that, but where are we seasonally?
Well, one thing is, one of the things this is showing is with all these nations coming in is that America's influence is declining. You would never have that before with all the nations move in like that. There's a vacuum, Secondly, this is also a prophetic Jubilee year. Now, will not make prediction about it, but we'll get into it. It could be very significant because the last time this happened, there was war. Every time this cycle happens, there was war, but it brought about God's purposes and end time purposes. So some of the most significant things is we are watching a gigantic, the Bible says that before that day comes, Paul said, it won't happen until there's a great apostasy or falling away. Well, we're watching that. That's prophetically significant. So we have to be aware of it. At the same time, we're watching the nations of the world still condemning Israel, coming against Israel, coming in, and we're watching Israel's enemies rise up all over. So we are definitely approaching more rapidly, where the apostasy is more rapid, and what's happening in the world, the events are destabilizing. We're watching like the end of this American-led order of peace. Since World War II, it's just breaking down all over, and God is the only answer. So things are speeding up all over, including Israel. At the same time, the other side is the revival all over the world. The Bible says the gospel shall be preached. I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. And that is also happening too. And also Jewish people are coming to the Lord, which also has to happen before the end too. So we're watching really all these things. Everything the Bible said everything is moving to that direction. Absolutely.
Yeah. So a lot of people still asking, I want to hear what Rabbi Cahn has to say about the rapture, about the tribulation, pre, mid, and post. What is your view on all that?
I'm pan-trib. I believe it's all going to pan out.
That is a great answer.
So the things without being committal, the point is either way, we have to be two things, we have to be ready for the Lord to come at any moment, to meet the Lord at any moment, and we have to be ready to go through whatever we have to go through. So that's the best of both things. And it's not, I don't believe we're to be fighting over this, that issue. This is not, the Bible doesn't fight over it, but be ready either way, and also be ready to go through as well. Because either way, listen, we're watching, we talked about persecution for years, but it's happening now. We're watching that now. So whether you go through the tribulation or not, you're going to have to go through things, and we're going to have to be strong for the days ahead.
So what do you see on the prophetic time clock that's coming? And again, I think I asked you this earlier. Were you surprised at some of the things that happened in 2015? Or
yeah, I mean, you never know how things are going to manifest. So how it would be, that's one thing. I wasn't surprised about America crossing the line of that fall with marriage. I mean, that that we saw coming.
I was surprised. I mean,
Really?
I was surprised that the Supreme Court would make that ruling based on what the states had already said, that they basically, you know, kind of crossed boundaries that our founding fathers never intended.
Well, you know, our founding fathers would roll over in their graves. You know, when the Shemitah began, within about 2 weeks of that, the Supreme Court made a decision not to defend the defense of marriage. And so with that one act, this whole Shemitah year has been sweeping down of state laws, overturning until we got to that. The Lord called me to go down to Washington, D.C. I was down there that day when they heard the case, and I just went there to the steps of the Capitol, and there was just a few of God's people there, one with sackcloth on, and one, they're just standing as witnesses of God. But I was there, and it was the next day, the Lord opened the door for me to speak to members of Congress. I believe there's a reason for that. So I believed it was coming, you know, and, you know, again, Shemitah means fall. So all these things, that part didn't surprise me, but it's accelerating. That does surprise me. I mean, and how fast. It did surprise me that when someone was thrown in jail for saying, I can't go along with this, the majority of Americans said, good, throw her in jail. I mean, that was gigantic, you know, good, evil, and evil, good.
Same thing like with a couple who owned a small bakery.
Yeah.
They had made cakes and things for a lesbian couple, but when they said, we want you to come do our wedding, they said,
we can't.
We can't. And look what happened to them. They're out of business now. They were given a huge fine. It's crazy. Another thing someone mentioned is, and I remember this, Jonathan, my son, sent me, I believe, the picture of this. And maybe you can explain, a lot of viewers may not even know this, but the goddess Kali.
Oh, okay. Let me
on
tell
the Empire State Building?
Yes.
What is this?
Yes. Joni, there are 3 abominations that brought judgment to Israel. And we touched on one of them, but let me say this one here. One of the abominations, in the Hebrew language, the word for abomination, shekutz, also means idol. Same word. As when you look at Revelation, the abomination, desolation, is an idol, false gods. When images of false gods appeared in the land, what happened? When that happened, that was a sign of judgment coming. This summer was the summer of marriage. It was the summer actually when it came out that we are actually selling the aborted baby parts. I mean, this is another abomination. Israel was judged for the destruction of its children. And then the last one. This summer, all of a sudden in New York City, where we are, the image of this false god abomination, this has to be the largest image of a false god in the history of the planet Earth. Has to be. This is just her face on Kali. Is the god of darkness. And now how did they do that? They projected light, all sorts of projectors onto the Empire State Building, so they used light to produce darkness. The Bible says, woe to those who put light for darkness, literally on that. Kali is also the goddess of death and destruction. So here over New York City comes the god of death and destruction.
Why? Who did that? What was the reason?
It is,
for
you know what? It's like the harbingers that you say, why do people pronounce judgment? Why do they do it? It's like they have to do it, and they don't know what they're doing, but they don't know why they're doing it. This had something to do with the fact that they were saying, well, you know, we have to protect the earth from global warming or ecology, you know, the ecological thing. So what they say, so we're appointing Kali as our protector. Kali as our protector. Kali is the goddess of it. You know, if you look at that image, you see her tongue out. It's dripping with blood from destruction. She's the destroyer put over America, put over New York City. If that's not a harbinger, what is?
So we don't know who did this?
It was some ecology thing celebrating Mother Earth and then appointing Kali as the protector.
And so when did this happen? I know
this happened the same summer of all these things, basically abominations. It happened in August. And it happened also, now I don't think they planned this, it happened right during the celebration, Kali's appointed celebration in India. At the same time, it appeared over America. And God says, you know, you go after these gods, you turn away from me, and what do you turn to? You turn to destruction. You turn to death. You turn to things that are not going to bless you. They're going to come back at you. So here it is, the other abomination.
It was interesting when we just heard the news about the terrible shooting that took place in San Bernardino, California, by two radical Islamic, a couple, a married couple who had a 6-month-old child.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. But it was interesting to watch the evolution of that story, because it's like no one wanted to say that they were radical, Islam, that was involved in it. But the story is now coming out pretty clear that that's what's happening, and how many others have been thwarted, and how many are still planning something here in America.
Yeah, this was, the woman had pledged herself to ISIS. So even ISIS is part of this. It was total, at the beginning the president said, well, we don't know it's terrorism. Well, it is terrorism. And interesting, the guy, as you probably know from the stories, got into a thing with a Messianic Jew, someone who's standing for the Bible, in the midst of this. But but if you look, Joni, it's like amazing. Everything's in the Bible, because this pattern is exactly what happened to Israel. As they turned from, he says, you're turning from your protection, your strength, you're turning from me, I'm here to save you. And what's going to happen is your enemies are going to come, the things you're going after, you're going for everything that's anti-me, it's going to come home to you. And that is absolutely one of the signs of that. Absolutely. It's like we're being bombarded by it.
Yeah.
Bombarded by it.
There's a roll-in that you brought, and we want to show that. Could you set that up for our audience?
This is when the Lord opened the door for me to go to Washington. I wasn't planning it, but it turned out to be the day that the Supreme Court heard was going to decide the case.
Wow.
And it was the next day.
So my heart. Find love like this. Never thought I'd be waiting. Move your body, let your spirit soar. Ella, you're out and move your body. And the way you speak to me brings thoughts. I always hoped that you would stay.